Welcome to Alpine Daily for a Friday. Today I want to answer the question, does God work in your life? Sometimes when we read the Bible, it can be a little discouraging because we read all sorts of stories about people who get to hear messages from God and they have visions from God and God works miracles in their lives. And we say, well, yeah, God was working in their life. I mean, just look at all the cool things they did. Look at all the stuff they accomplished. And then we look at our own lives and we wonder, does God work in my life? Does God even really know what's going on in life? Or has God just sort of forgotten me? I don't know if you feel like that. I sometimes feel like that. And that's one thing I appreciate about the book of Nehemiah, is that Nehemiah shows us how God works in our lives, kind of for the rest of us, for those of us who aren't Moses and aren't Abraham and aren't the Apostle Paul. This is kind of how God normally works in our life. And I can give you an example of what I mean in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 11. The first part of the verse is a prayer, but the second part, which probably should be its own verse, says this: I was cupbearer to the king. Now, you might just think that's kind of a random detail that he throws in there to kind of help the story move along. But when I read, I was cupbearer to the king, what I see is a powerful example of God's work in the life of Nehemiah. Because when we read that Nehemiah was cupbearer to the king, this is the key that's going to allow him to accomplish all that he accomplishes through the rest of the book. And what Nehemiah is doing here is he is letting us in on a little secret. He realizes that the reason that he is cupbearer to the king isn't because he's good at delivering wine to a king or because he was unfortunate enough to become a slave and a servant to the king of Persia. He realizes that he was cupbearer to the king for this moment where he would go before the king and ask for permission to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He understands that this is not a cosmic accident, that the way that God has been working in his life has been putting him in this job where he can impact the world for God and fulfill his purpose. And I think that Nehemiah 1:11 is a fulfillment of Romans 8:28, a verse that maybe some of you are very familiar with. And this is what it says: and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. What I want to focus in on is this first part. We know that in all things God works. That means in your life, in the details of your life, God is at work. But here's the reality. If we're not aware of it, if we're not looking for how God is at work in our lives, then we can miss out on what God is doing in our lives. And we can just sort of think that God has forgotten us. So here's what I want to encourage you today. I want to encourage you to spend some time thinking about how God is at work in your life. I think we have to be intentional about this. Otherwise, like I said, we're going to miss out on it. And so take some time, think about the circumstances of your life. And as you think about the circumstances of your life, the job you're in right now, the situation that your family's in, what is God trying to teach you through those circumstances? How has he put you in the place that you're in? What purpose does he have? What is he trying to teach you? What is he trying to show you? How is he trying to use this to fulfill his purpose for your life? And begin to sense how God is at work in your life, because he is day in, day out, just like he was in Nehemiah's life, just like he was in Moses' life. And when you understand that, it'll just change the way you look at your life.